This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts on the Wire, episode 7. Menz. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Experts on the Wire. This is where we share digital marketing insights from the smartest minds online. Today's episode features Menz of a tool called Remove. She's going to teach us how to evaluate backlinks, how to find backlinks to your site, why you need to register all of your site variants in Google Webmaster Tools and what that even means, and the one thing people think is a penalty in Google, but it is not actually a penalty. She's going to explain all that. So definitely be ready to take notes. Of course, you can find the show notes on evolvingseo.com/wire. That's where we list all of the episodes. So definitely please visit there and check out the links in the show notes. For you growth hacking fans, you're going to really be in for a treat on episode 8 coming out in a couple days on Friday. We have Anuj Arya, who is part of the growth department at growthhackers.com. So as I always tease him, this role must come with a little bit of pressure. You're trying to actually achieve growth at Growth Hackers. And hopefully that goal is fulfilled there. But he's going to talk about a lot of fascinating aspects, some of the metrics they measure, some of his and their philosophies on what growth hacking even is. And I think a lot of people probably, interestingly, have the wrong outlook on growth hacking, and he really kind of breaks it down and explains it in a very clear and concise way. So if you've been enjoying these podcasts, now we're on episode 7. So as I've been saying all along, kind of 7 through 10 and beyond is now we're in the territory where hopefully you've seen the consistent value of the guests, of the questions, of the digging that we're doing with the guests that are on the show, that if you have enjoyed them so far, you're confident enough in us to leave a review in the iTunes store. And as I always say, if you have a review with some critique, we're looking for any feedback at all. So of course we would love a positive review, but if you've got some critical feedback, that is fine as well. I'd also love to know from some people, what has been your favorite show thus far, or favorite just aspect about this show? Please hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Dan_Shure, Shure. Tell me your favorite, what your favorite episode has been thus far. I would love to hear that feedback. And last thing, before we get into today's conversation with Menz, just a quick note that we had a couple glitches with Skype. I've edited most of them out. If you hear a few things go a little wonky, don't worry. I've combed through the entire episode and can assure you that it is a smooth ride the whole way through. So I hope you enjoy today's episode with Menz. I am super excited to have Menz from Remove with me here on the phone. The virtual phone. We're on Skype, but I'll call it the phone. On the line, on the wire. So how are you today?
I'm great, actually. I'm kind of two days back from a trip to the US for some conference gigs, so I'm kind of feeling like I'm on the right side of the planet again.
That's good. So you were at, was it SMX Advanced?
No, Advanced is coming up in June, so we did PubCon in Fort Lauderdale, the regional SFEMA conference, and then SMX West in San Jose, and then we've finished off with SearchFest up in Portland, which was awesome.
Oh, wow. So you really made the rounds. That's great.
Yep, got to make a trip count when we do it.
Absolutely. I've yet to get to Australia, where you were located. And before I jump into the show, there's a very interesting thing about the time zone that you're in. Can you tell us about this? You're actually a half an hour different from most people in Australia.
Yeah, well, there's actually this interesting old story, which is the one I've been told. I'm not sure that it's 100% factual, but it's a great rivalry. It makes for a great rivalry between states. So basically, we have a very, very expansive country. If you take the map of Australia and kind of sit it over the top of the map of the USA, you'll find that there's really not that much hanging out underneath. So we're quite a broad country, but we don't have very many states. So basically what happened was that they decided it would be really, really silly for our time, for us to adopt the time zone, which is effectively 2 hours away in one direction. They didn't like the one that was an hour away in the other direction, and so they decided to just make it a half an hour in between. But the really interesting thing is that the state line, apparently it's about 100 miles one side of where it should be. So there are parts of the state of South Australia that apparently belong to the state of Victoria, and it has made for quite a good rivalry over the years.
Wow, that is fascinating. So that threw me off when you sent the time zone. I was like half hour off and I had to figure it out. But right before we get into the show, I want to let people know, the listeners know, that you're going to give away 3 months of your tool Remove. Am I saying that correct? It's just you pronounced it like remove, like the word remove?
That's exactly as it is, yes. There's a little story that if anyone's a programmer out there, they might be able to figure out why it's spelled that way.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we're having Skype's cutting out a tiny bit, but I'm going to keep on going through and see if we can get through it, and I can edit it after. But we're going to give away, you're going to give away 3 months of this tool for free. That's $150 value. So that's for anybody that, if you listen to the end of the show, I'm going to tell you how to enter that contest, and you'll have a week to do so. So let's get into the meat of the show for today. And we're going to talk a lot about SEO, specifically things having to do with links, link removal, and penalties. So I want to jump right into some questions. You've given presentations related to the dangers of doorway pages. And so I know you're an expert at this topic. Can you give, for our listeners, can you kind of give a summary and definition about what they are and why you should not be using doorway pages?
Well, effectively, a doorway page is a page that's been created for one reason and one reason only. That is to capture the traffic for a particular keyword or keyword phrase. And generally, I know that most people would say, well, I'm doing that for all of my pages. But generally, the pages that are referred to as doorway pages are the ones that exist in isolation fairly well. So they don't fit well within the normal hierarchy of a site. So it's not a logical progression from one place to another to get to that page. They're simply created for that purpose. And in some cases, they're not linked to from anything else, but somewhere external, and they only link to something else, to one place generally. And what they primarily do is leave the user at a place they didn't expect to be. So if you can imagine, and we don't see them so much these days because a lot of people have actually woken up that they should not do this, but there are still some instances around where you might perhaps have searched for something. Say you wanted to find a taxi cab in Miami, and you would search for that. You would come up with a result that looks like it's a site, that does taxi cabs in Miami. And when you click through, you would actually get deposited on a page that, if you click the links from that page, you click through and get deposited on a page that gives you limousine rental or something like that. So they're primarily there to hijack the user to something else, and or to send you only to one place. So you might get to a page that looks perfectly legitimate. It has 30 links on it, and every one of those links points to the same place. So they frustrate users. They are purely manipulative because they've been designed for the purpose of capturing that search traffic and nothing else. And they're also a form of unnatural linking. So that's the reason why I tell people not to use them, because they can actually feed into a unnatural linking problem and be a part of a penalty situation.
Absolutely. Now, you would think people by now would know not to use these. So do you still find people are actually trying to use doorway pages even in 2016 as we're recording this episode?
Yep. Even in 2016, there are some people who are still creating them in ways that they think they're clever enough to kind of say, well, that's not really a doorway page because I actually planted mine in the middle of a hierarchy. No, that's not really the criteria that's looked at. It's still doing that job of being, what the user doesn't really want and trying to manipulate what's going on. So, just because you change one of those things doesn't make it okay. The other thing is that there are a lot of people who created them initially and, have gained traffic from them, who have made the decision that they will leave them there because they think they're still benefiting from them. And so, they're kind of playing this wait and see game of, will I get hurt by it? And there was an algorithmic adjustment or an algorithmic filter that was released in May of last year, or late April, early May of last year. Mm-hmm. And that certainly made a big difference very quickly to the most obvious. But there are still sites, and in particular, some of the big enterprise sites, the big retailers, in fact, who have specific product pages that they have created purely and simply to capture that part of the traffic. And so those sites, the people who run those sites need to look very carefully at how they are positioned, because the really obvious thing is that it's very, very easy to detect these pages algorithmically because of the way they're structured and where they actually sit inside the hierarchy of a site. If they're not actually in a logical place, it's very easy algorithmically to detect them. So you need to be thinking about it. The other thing is that you may have wonderful, wonderful pages that you've created for that purpose, and there's no reason why you can't actually just remediate those pages and have the benefit of that great content remaining on your site, but just fix what you've done that might not be so great with the linking.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just take the page you already made and do it in the right way.
Some people have actually put a huge amount of effort into building them, and it seems an awful shame to just, say, okay, I won't use those pages anymore. And it's really not that difficult. If you think, in from a link earning perspective, and also think about a value perspective for your customers, then it's not that hard to remediate them and have some use out of them.
Absolutely. So is it possible, it sounds like a business or a website could have doorway pages and not really know about it? So how would a business owner or the e-commerce manager or somebody go about trying to find these doorway pages?
Okay, so if you've had teams of people working on creating pages for your site, then in most cases you should have some kind of a record of what's been worked on and what's been developed. Or, if you use a method where you actually all work in a common environment so you can see each other's work, then it's reasonably easy to just look at those pages and know what's happening in there. If you've had multiple people work on your site, that's when it gets a little more difficult. And often, people have hired people to do that kind of work. And, then in the end, they don't really know what's been done. All they really look at is the effect that's created. So one of the things that it might be necessary to do, especially if you have a very large site, is to actually think about getting someone like a person who does technical SEO audits to actually do some work on the site for you if you're not experienced. But if you're just a regular person and you have a reasonable amount of tech savvy, you can just do something simple like go out and get Screaming Frog or one of the other crawling tools and just crawl your entire site and find all the pages that are there and see what's there. And then go have a look at them, click a few links and see if they lead you to the place you expect or not. And that's usually the big surprise. I've actually sat with a couple of clients and seen the look on their face when they realized what clicking a link on one of the pages in their site actually resulted in for their customers, and they were not very happy at the end.
That's a great tip. So I want to shift things a little. Thank you for the information about the doorway pages. So in my research, I found that you are a former news journalist and editor. So How does that curiosity to find and share a story relate to SEO and search engine optimization? Do you find that being curious is an asset to helping your clients?
Well, absolutely. There are so many things in search that are based on understanding people and things and why things work the way they do, and in some cases, why we actually put up with them working the way they do. So, having a curiosity for those things and also a real, a thirst for understanding how people's minds work, which is a lot of, journalism. When you're actually building a story or you're digging into information for a story, you have to understand what the people at the other end really want to know about and what's going to affect them and why you should or shouldn't write something. So it's very much the same when you're working in search, and especially if you're doing content development. Of course, the people who prosper most are those who actually think about the end user first, and that is very much the way of journalism. So it's one of those things that I guess transfers very nicely. The fact that I'm a word nerd, which is why I ended up in that job, and effectively why I ended up in this job. But then, of course, now that I've kind of transitioned into doing primarily work on penalty recovery and unnatural linking, it's another kind of curiosity. It's the curiosity of understanding how on earth did you get to where you are, and what are all these amazing and sometimes quite challenging things that really intelligent people have come up with as ways to try and get around the algorithm. It always fascinates me. The different lengths that people will go to, the things that people think they can build or create. And also in the case of webmasters who don't necessarily want to be contacted for link removal, sometimes they come up with some pretty innovative ways of trying to avoid crawlers and trying to pretend that their sites or pages are no longer there and all those things. So it's definitely the job of the inquiring mind.
It's really interesting the length that people will go through to do black hat things or even gray hat when you could just do white hat things that will get even better results and you can sleep at night.
Yeah, and it's funny, like from my point of view, when I'm working on penalties, sometimes we'll have people, webmasters in particular, who will go to like huge effort to avoid being sent an email when they could just send one back that says, "Don't send me another email." And, and you're just like, okay. A lot of that is the emotion of the whole situation, of course, and that's one of the things that we deal with a lot. So you get to understand it, but sometimes it can be quite fascinating that someone can spend literally days coding something, when they could just send back an email and say, "Don't bother me again." So that's the way it is sometimes. It's the human element.
Yeah, I think some of those people are probably introverts, and maybe that's just how they are. So awesome information on that. So one thing I want to jump to, and I hope you don't mind, and the listeners don't mind kind of the rapid fire questions, but I really like to jump through different topics to kind of make sure I deliver a whole bunch of different little elements within the work that you do and just bring as much value as possible. So let's jump to a topic, and there's a post that you wrote on, I don't even sure what this website stands for, dfwsem.org. What does that stand for?
My goodness, Dan, that's the Dallas-Fort Worth Search Engine Marketing Association. That's one of the most powerful meetup-based groups, I guess you could call them, although I think they've gone far past that. So basically, they are the people who run the State of Search conference every year. Right. And pretty much, you've got some major ones, but probably SEM PDX in Portland, who run SearchFest, and DFW SEM in Dallas, who run State of Search. And of course, they not only do they run State of Search, but they have a year-long program of monthly meetings where they bring in some of the smartest people in the industry. And if you're ever in Dallas around, I think it's the second Wednesday of the month or something, you need to check that on their site. But if you're there, it's well worth you. You probably see some of your good friends there occasionally. I
probably will. I don't make it to Texas a lot. The U.S. is a big place, so getting to Texas is definitely a little bit of I mean, you went all, who am I to say? You went all the way from Australia to the U.S., so that's a huge trip.
Yeah, Texas, you've got to be careful of. I found it's a bit like a vortex. It keeps dragging you back.
Yeah, definitely.
That might be more to do with the people at DFW SEM, though.
That's quite possible, yes. But so great. And we're going to link up all these sites and domains in the show notes on the website as well, so people can easily get to them. But on that site, you wrote a post called "Are You Stuck in Google's Penalty Box?" And you were drawing attention to a quote from Google Webmaster Tools. And it says in that, in order to see your data correctly, you will need to verify all existing site variants of your site. And they mean www, non-www, HTTPS, HTTP, subdirectories, subdomains. And for people that don't know, in Google Webmaster Tools, you actually have to do that to get data across all your domains. And they recommend doing that. So from a link removal or manual penalty or penalty situation, why is that important to register all your site variants in Google Webmaster Tools?
Okay, so well, up until they made this change, which I've talked about in this post, which was I think in March of 2014, they made the change ostensibly to make it easier for us to dig more deeply into individual parts of a site and get more information about them, which is great if that is your primary job and you have no other issues going on. But what actually happened when they separated out those variants, they've created a situation where you only get specific notifications for the manual actions in particular within each variant. So what that means is if you don't have the profiles actually verified in Google, and I should say it's now called Google Search Console. It's changed since I wrote that post. I must go back and get them to make a change there. But if you don't have all of those variants verified, you can effectively only see one part of your site. And the penalty notifications for manual actions actually only appear for that one variant of the site. So you could have a manual action on the www subdomain and also on the non-www subdomain. But if you can only see one, you're only aware of one manual action. And so, or in fact, you may be in a situation which I've seen several times where in the old days, it was kind of accepted that people would verify a profile for the entire site, so the non-www profile, and then they would go into what was then Google Webmaster Tools and select a little radio button that would say, show me as a www. And so that was pretty much how the majority of people had their sites set up initially. And they, of course, thought they had needed only one profile. And up until this change, they did. But what it actually means is that if you have done that, but you have hired link builders tend to primarily build links to the www version of a site. So if you're looking in Google Search Console and saying, oh, yes, I've looked at my manual actions notifier and it says, no, there are no manual actions, then I'm good. So if I've got what looks like an unnatural linking issue, like if I think I've got a Penguin penalty, then the majority of people will deal with Penguin in a completely different way because they believe that they can just disavow those links and move on. And Penguin will, when it updates, accept that, and that will be all they need to do. However, they could actually have a manual action on another variant that they don't know about. This is really important also for sites who have a blog.subdomain, for example, or very large subdirectories that they actually could have link building activity have gone on towards. And the other thing is if you're in a very, very competitive niche and you are concerned about people who might try to actually influence your linking profile unnaturally as a way of getting at you or creating a problem for you, then you really do need to be aware of everything that's going on, because there have actually been situations also where things have been built to variants where you would think, like you didn't really need to worry. So it's a matter of being very thoughtful about it and making sure that you have them all verified, and then you can just easily check to see if there is a manual action or not. And that way you can actually know what your situation is. If you think you've got an unnatural linking problem, you can at least verify whether it is, an algorithmic issue or whether there are actually manual actions happening. And of course, it's much easier to clear a manual action than a Penguin penalty.
That is great advice. I don't deal with a lot of penalty issues with clients. I'm dealing more with proactive SEO, but that is something I haven't thought of a whole lot. I usually, for the listeners out there, another reason to register variants and subfolders is you get more keyword data as well. So especially if you have a big site, I always am consulting for my clients that have very large sites to register their subfolders and even their subfolders to get keyword data specific to that section.
That's the thing. They made this change in order to make it better for people. But the problem is if you have an issue like unnatural linking, because it was really just the method they chose to make the change, that, where it's not reflected back into one particular place, whether there are manual actions across multiple variants. And that's really an issue. And we've spoken to Google about that. I think, often when we raise these issues, they aren't always as simple to fix as we would like to think. It's probably in a system like Google, it's probably like a bit like trying to turn the Queen Mary with a single tug.
Yes.
And that, nothing ever happens quickly, but we have brought it to their attention. And, people who work in penalties are very aware of this. But for those people who are working on their own stuff, or perhaps agency people who are not, very experienced at dealing with penalties, it's one of the things that can very easily trip you up. And it's often the answer when people come to us, where they've done a lot of work and tried to actually fix their situation and nothing is happening. They've cleared a manual action, but still there's absolutely nothing happening. On many occasions, when we go back and look at the other variants, we'll find that there are other manual actions in place that are actually holding them back. So it's something to be very aware of. And that's essentially why I wrote the post.
Absolutely. And we'll link up that post, like I said, in the show notes for people who want to check it out. Let's talk a little bit more about analyzing link profiles, backlink profiles. And this show is not only for SEOs. I mean, if you're an SEO listening to this, that's great. I'm very, very complimented by that. So thank you for tuning in. But this show is also for just business people or maybe marketers or people that are learning about SEO. So I want to cover some things about evaluating link profiles. What are some of the common mistakes or misconceptions? Let's say you're a business owner, you're looking at your backlink profile for your business. What are some of the common myths that you see that those people have?
Okay, so there are some simple mistakes that people make right at the outset, which often can be the difference between clearing something up successfully or not. Mm-hmm. The first one is not to ignore links that you think are already dead. So one of the things that we always do, of course, is we get as much data as we possibly can. And that is, you need to get data across as many sources as possible, because one of the sources you have is your Google Search Console information, but that's only a sample. And especially if you have this variant situation in place, what can actually happen is that the data you get from the variant you have, because that's another part of that issue, is you only get one set of linking data. You don't actually get linking data propagated into the other variants. So sometimes that can mean that what you have is limited to a particular variant and your problem may actually be on other variants. So you need to look at getting hold of as much data as you possibly can using other tools.
What are some of the other tools you would recommend?
Right. So we like to use Majestic. It gives us a very, very broad look at the link profile. And what I do is go back and use the historical records from Majestic, which actually tells you what's been there in the past. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when a link when the link information is not being represented in the fresh index, it's purely because it's buried somewhere that hasn't been actually crawled for a long time. So we use the historical information from there. People may have all kinds of tools already in their toolbox. So there are things like SEMrush and Ahrefs, and there are some tools out there that actually do look at actually pulling information from lots of different sources, like Kerboo, for example. Mm-hmm. And so by getting all of that data, but also not forgetting that if you have a site, you actually probably should have Bing Webmaster Tools set up as well, and they actually provide quite a lot of link data and some really good tools for looking at how your site's working too, I might add.
Yes.
So it's a good idea to go and get all of that data and also look at things that you might have, information you might have within your business. So often small business owners have employed someone to do the work for them, and they've actually been sent, Excel files every month to show what work has been done and what links have been created. And so they actually have those sitting in their archives. And that's a really good way of getting to the data, because often there's stuff in there that you will never find in a tool. So you can combine all that together. And another really interesting place to look, which I discovered a long time ago that kind of floored me a little bit, was to look in your analytics data. Yes. And look at the referral information. And, you can toggle that information. So you can click the little arrow at the top so that you get least to most. So set your date back 12 months set your date back as far as you can go. We won't go into that one. And look at how many link clicks you've actually had. And if there are a lot there that have only had one click, often that's someone who's just built a link and clicked it to make sure it works. And so you can quite often find some really strange URLs in there of, link stuff that's linked to you that generally is people trying to do not so nice stuff. So that's a really good place to pick up some extra stuff. The other thing is if you're really having trouble, if you've been doing this for a while and you're really having trouble and you just can't clear it, to look for extra data. And one of the things we do is to actually go and mine the search result pages. So we actually go and search with the site operator and actually do a bit of work there and actually finding things that might be linked to the site. And that's a very long and tedious process, but for some sites, that's something that needs to be done because people are still actively creating links that are quite fresh and haven't turned up in the tools. But usually if you can use those major tools, and if you can't get to those, then find someone who can help you to get to them. That's one of the things that I've discovered is there are a lot of very helpful people in this industry. And for example, if you really need some data about something and you're not able to get it and you absolutely can't afford to get it, you could maybe call someone like, Remove or some of the other people around the place. And I'm sure that you'll find someone who's nice enough to actually grab a file for you without too much problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the greatest things about the industry is just the general generosity that I see across the board. So that's great. Those tips are awesome. Yeah. So that's how to find a very thorough way of places to find all the links. Once you do that, then what are some of the mistakes that people make when they're evaluating those links?
Okay, so as I said, the first thing is not to just throw out everything you think is dead, because one of the things that does happen is that sites go down, pages, get 404'd. Sometimes webmasters deliberately hide them with redirects that go away and all kinds of stuff. So it's a good idea to get all of the data, then crawl and see what is still live, but don't just, once you've done that, ignore those links you think are dead. You need to go back and look at those periodically again through the life of the work that you're doing to make sure that if anything has come live again, you're not, disregarding it and missing it effectively. Then you need to look at what's actually happening with those links. And the first thing, of course, to look for, the most obvious that will get you, if you're dealing with a manual action, is any form of paid link. And be really careful, because paid link does not necessarily mean you paid somebody money to get it. In many, many cases, there are businesses who were following advice that was supposed to be good many years ago, or not so many years ago probably, about sending people items for review. And so one of the things that happened was that they would send perhaps a product, and a person would review it and would create a review online and link, and that was all good until lots and lots of people started doing it deliberately as a means of getting links. And so that is one of the things that does come very high on the radar. And it is one of the things that people do often make the mistake of thinking that those links are okay and they're not paid because no money changed hands. But as far as Google is concerned, if a product changed hands and the result was a review, then it is a very slippery slope. There are some instances where that's okay, but generally you would be looking for those links to have been no-followed, for a signal to be sent to the search engine that says, okay, somebody sent me this and I wrote a review about it, and we don't want you to count that as an earned link.
So this was an very interesting thing that happened, I think, about a week ago. Google posted a blog post about this, reinforcing that they don't want people to basically exchange products for links. However, what are your thoughts on the fact that it is possible for somebody to give a product to a blogger, not really thinking about SEO? That blogger writes a review and gives them a link. The blogger doesn't know anything about no follow or not no follow, and the link's followed. How does Google know the difference?
Well, how does Google know the difference? Really, it comes down to common sense, I think. And it's an interesting idea to think that common sense and algorithms can work together. But in a lot of cases, they actually appear to have made it possible. So, it comes to whether there is authority in place, whether those people might have systems in place for people to just naturally send them products. There's a difference between, someone saying, listen, I write stories about things, send me all your stuff, and then writing a story and saying, this is awesome and you should buy it, and creating a link. And someone who actually, writes an email to someone saying, please, 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 I'm sending you something, please, please, please review it. And then, the person ends up reviewing it. And, that's a kind of a different situation, even though it seems the same. Mm-hmm. And I think often, because people have authority and they have blogs that are, consistently producing that kind of content. Also, they have text on their site that actually spells out that, if you send me things. And one of the really interesting things to think about is that it's not a matter of send me something and I will write a review for you. Mm-hmm. It's send me your product, and if it's great, I'll tell people about it. Right. That's a completely different thing. And that's also a place where people trip up with directory links. So, there are some directories out there which are quite large that you can actually have links from, which are not a problem at all. And those are those directories, like the Yahoo directory, for example, where you actually, yes, you pay money, but you're not paying money for a link. You're paying money to have someone review your site. And at the point where they've reviewed your site is entirely an editorial decision whether they say, well, that's a pretty good site, we'll put that on our directory, or no, we won't worry about that. The key is you don't get your money back again. It's what you're paying for is someone to spend the time reviewing it. And with the reviews for products, it's pretty much the same thing. If someone has an open channel for you to send things to them, for them to actually experience new products and then they write about them, that's a completely different situation.
So you obviously look at a very large amount of bad links. I'm curious for the listeners, what's your definition of a good link that you would not seek to remove?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so, and this is where it gets tricky because the terminology, even the good link and the bad link, are kind of tricky as well.
Yes, and being a little black and white on purpose, so feel free to clarify that.
Okay, so really it's about whether it's a naturally earned link or not.
Yes.
And there are situations where I can look at pages and go, oh, I think someone wrote that purely naturally, but I think a search engine algorithm is going to feel differently. And in those cases, we have actually, if we're dealing with a manual action, of course, we have made a case. We have said to the Google team, no, I'm sorry, this is entirely natural. And the thing you need to be able to do when you do that is to back it up with proof. So what we actually do is we go ahead, we send the email to someone, to that webmaster and say, look, we love that you've linked to us. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. We have a feeling that maybe this link looks a little funny to an algorithm, or the web spam team may be taking it as an unnatural link. And so we just wondered if perhaps you'd consider no following it. And 9 times out of 10, we will get an email back from that webmaster saying, no, your stuff is great and awesome, and I just want to share it with my readers, and, you really don't want me to no follow that link. And as soon as that happens, I have a piece of evidence that I can then send to the web spam team and say, look, it's a natural link, it's not a problem. And we've cleared penalties based on the fact that, people had those links that simply looked unnatural, because they fit within the parameters of what were thought to be. But as long as you can prove that that's not the case, then, they're normal human people. They will accept that.
So there are false positives within Google's algorithm.
There are false positives, yes. And I'm sure there are lots of people out there who are complaining about a few false negatives around the place too. Yes. There are still some people who get away with some stuff. But then, that is sort of decreasing over time too. It's one of the things that I say a lot when I speak is that those people sitting in the room who think that they have no problem because they haven't been caught yet should probably think again fairly quickly, because, you know, it is quite possible that the next update will happen, or someone will just purely and simply lodge a report, and, you know, someone looks at your site and suddenly you have a manual action. And it's much, much easier to deal with that before the fact than after.
So it's very interesting. I like how you define a good link as being naturally earned. Mm-hmm. However, you know, there's this gray area where people know about SEO. I know about SEO, and I try to get my clients to do things that I know will result in a link. But it's not, I'm not really building links in a black hat way. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm just taking a Venn diagram and I'm saying, okay, this activity does something for their business, and it also helps them get a link. There's an overlap.
Sure.
Is that unnatural?
I guess that depends how far you want to take it. Generally, if the way I look at it is, if what I'm doing has the power to affect an audience and it has the power to fix a problem for people, that's what I'm actually doing it for. Right. And if links come, which I know they will, it's kind of, you know, that thing where you know the consequences of your actions. Yes. And if you're carrying out those actions for the right reasons and the other consequences are even better, well, that's just cream. So, you know, I think I always try to explain to people that those things they do which make life better for their customers, make their products better, you know, in some cases make the world better, then those things are naturally going to have people, you know, pay attention to you and share information about you and all those things, then that's great. And, you know, if that's linking, it's fantastic. But the other thing to be aware of is if people just mention your name on a page these days, that can have an effect all of its own as well. So, you know, having to have link is not always the only way. Yeah, you would probably call that a citation. You'd be getting a citation of your name or business. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's exactly a huge factor in local SEO, with the NAP citation, name, address, phone number. Speaking of local SEO, quick diversion. We had Phil Rosnack from Local Visibility System on episode, I think 4, I want to say, maybe 5. Mm-hmm. He was a couple episodes before you. And by the way, if anyone listening is enjoying what Shaw has to say, go back and check out episode 6 with our friend Jen Slegg from the SEM Post. Her episode, that was fantastic. I really hope people go check that out. And then, of course, stick around for the next episode with Anuj from Growth Hackers. He's actually helping run growth for growth hackers, which seems to be not to put a spotlight on somebody, but that's kind of what we're doing with Anuj. And he talks a lot about growth hacking and analysis and stuff. So definitely, I hope people check out episode 8 with Anuj. But yeah, let's jump back into what we were chatting about. So any other factors to kind of look at when people are evaluating a link, whether it could be harmful or whether it could be helpful? Well, of course, there's the obvious things of making sure that it is language that's appropriate. One of the big things that you need to think about is relevance. That's not to say you can't have a link from a place that isn't necessarily aligned to you, but that link should fit well within the text and, all of those things. If it comes from a crazy place, then obviously you know it's not a natural link. Things like bad neighborhoods, you would probably not want to have a whole lot of link happening from places that you know are suspect. One of the things that we do see a lot is all those people who created those amazing domains, the I-love-SEO- more than you kind of things and all those sorts of stuff. So, if you have links that are coming from domains that look like they were created manipulatively in the first place, chances that the links from those sites are manipulative also are pretty good. You can fairly easily analyze those. But one of the things I should mention is that there are a lot of people these days who are looking at some of the easy metrics we have. Domain authority was big for a while. Now a lot of people look at trust flow. And they're using those as a means of deciding whether they should remove. And it was right about here that Shah's Skype connection cut out for
about a minute or so, and I'm just going to kind of fill in the gap. She just basically talked about how a lot of people are using metrics, just simple metrics like domain authority from Moz or trust flow from Majestic SEO, as a way to decide if they should remove links or disavow links. And essentially the idea here is that's kind of a bad way to approach deciding if you should remove links or not. The metric is just, these are third-party metrics. First of all, these are not metrics directly from Google, and they don't really tell the whole story about what the link is about. It's just telling you the link authority that page has with the link on it that's pointing to you. It has no bearing on relevance or how old that page is or the quality of that page or what the quality of the links are pointing to that page. So the idea here is to look at it as a holistic system and not make any quick decisions and just start pulling out links all over the place, because you might actually hurt yourself. So let's resume our conversation with a clear Skype line with Shah.
So you need to be very careful about actually looking at things and not just making assumptions.
Got it. Great. We had a little Skype glitch there through that, so hopefully we caught all of that. And I want to ask one last question. It's kind of a fun one. And I'm curious to see what your reply might be to this. So let's imagine Panda, Penguin, Pigeon, and Phantom. That's a tongue twister. Those are all Google updates, by the way. Let's say they're trapped in a burning building and you can only save 3 of the 4. Who are you leaving behind and why? So what Google penalty do you just want to get rid of?
Okay, so, I'm leaving Phantom because Phantom actually doesn't exist. Phantom isn't a penalty. In fact, it's not an algorithmic filter. The other 3 are, in fact, algorithmic filters that Google has deliberately put in place. Phantom is a bit of an interesting one. It came out of clearly an adjustment that was made. I'm not convinced that Phantom is something that runs constantly. I think we have a situation where sometimes people see something happen and they jump on it, and then when something similar happens, they think it's another iteration of the same thing. I think one of the things that happens these days, we have adjustments being made to the core algorithm, and we now have other things that are informing the core algorithm. So not that long ago, it was said that, or Google actually confirmed that the Penguin algorithm is now incorporated as a signal for the core algorithm. So it's not actually a part of the algorithm itself, but it's informing that algorithm. And so what that means is it hasn't really changed anything at this point, because the Penguin algorithm itself is still a separate filter that will update when it's updated. And we don't know when that will be yet. We hope it won't be too much longer, but we certainly don't want them to introduce something that's defective. So, it's probably a good thing that they're holding off at this point. But when that happens, of course, that will change what's happening in the core algorithm. And so there are a lot of these things that happened, in the algorithm that we don't really know what they are. And when you think about it, even when we talk about the core algorithm, there are many more than one. We all tend to think about one, overarching thing, but there are literally thousands of things going on in there. And I think it's one of those things where something has changed and we all want to give it a name. So I'm leaving Phantom behind because I think it truly is Phantom, and I'm just going to take the 3 filters that are very, very important and do have an impact, and we hope that they will get better at being who they are over time, and that we won't have so many anomalies to deal with in the future. And I'm sure that Google are working very hard on all of those to make sure that that's the case.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. And it's a good choice. We weren't trying to trick you with that, but I like how you went with kind of the actual answer that it would be. And for anyone interested in Phantom, Glenn Gabe is the one that kind of coined that term, and we'll link that up in the show notes as well. So, Shah, this has been a fantastic interview. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Like I said, I'm more on the proactive side of SEO, not dealing with penalties as much. So I hope the listeners learn as much as I did and have taken notes themselves and kind of enjoy this episode. So it's been great chatting, and I want to encourage listeners to leave us a review on iTunes if you've been enjoying the podcast. I know we're about 7 episodes in now, so I don't. What do you think, Shah? Like 6 or 7 episodes? That's around the time when like we can start getting some reviews, I think, on iTunes.
Oh, I think. Well, I heard reviews after your first show, so I hope people have been putting those somewhere. But people were telling me it was pretty awesome. So, well done for that. And I think it's great to actually have the opportunity to hear from all of these people. Often, we're all kind of doing our work and we don't necessarily have the chance to be in the places where people can get to us and talk to us easily. So it's great to be able to tune in and listen on a podcast like this and catch up with what's happening with all those people. So thanks for that. And I should probably mention that if people are doing penalty work, they should probably be paying attention to the great positive stuff that guys like you are doing and thinking about how they could actually change or take those ideas and work them into a smart way of actually getting their link removal done. Because if they use really, really interesting outreach ideas like some of you guys are using, they can often get better cleanup rates. So that's what they should be thinking about.
Oh, good tip, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. And yes, it's good to connect. I mean, I'm sitting here in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is kind of it's not exactly the center of the SEO universe, and you're all the way over across the world. What is it, 8:30 in the morning or 8 for you or something like that in Australia?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So no, absolutely. Connecting on the podcast with everyone has been fantastic. So thank you for joining me. And let's just do the contest actually. So for anybody that tweets this episode in the next week with the hashtag #EOnTheWire, that's the letter E and the words on the wire, tweet this episode with Shah Menz, you will get 3 free months of her tool Remove. And your tool's domain is it's roomv.com, correct?
No, it's rmoov.com.
rmoov.com. Got it. Sorry about the mistake there.
That's where the little story comes from. If you're a really, really old Perl programmer, then you might recognize the RM is actually an old delete command. So that's where it all came from.
Got it. Very clever. So with that, we're going to wrap up episode 7 of Experts on the Wire. And Shah, thank you for joining me today. And we will see everyone next time. Thank you.